Well, the Celtics' biggest offseason acquisition, both literally and figuratively, Kristaps Porziņģis posting this on his Instagram. In Celtics gear with the caption, "May the next season be my best season." A lot of pressure on Porziņģis as the main addition of the summer. Marcus Smart, Grant Williams, of course, moving on to less green pastures. Brad Stevens also signing O'Shea Brissett and Delano Banton, but they're not expected to play that much. He did draft Jordan Walsh. We'll get to him later, just 19 years old. So is currently constructed. Are the Celtics better right now or worse than they were when the season ended? This is where we're going to begin our deep dive. We still have our two Chris's, Mannix and Forbserg. Amina Smith also joining the conversation. Mannix, better, worse, about the same?
As of now, mid-July, they're worse because you look at all those names you had up there. It really is Kristaps Porziņģis for Grant Williams and Marcus Smart. That, to me, is a step back because Marcus Smart, even though he was flawed, you know what he is. Grant Williams, as bad as he was in the second half of the season, he shot 41% from three in the first half, and I think getting a contract and security would have made him better going into this season. And Porziņģis, I'm sorry, he worries me. He does. He had a great year last year, but he was in a contract year playing for a team that went nowhere. Now he's going to have the security of a long-term contract playing for a team that needs him to fit into a system to be highly successful. I just have my concerns at how seamless he's going to fit into this mix.
Yeah, I do think that this team got a little bit worse, not drastically worse with the addition of Kristaps Porziņģis, but just like you said, Mannix, I really don't know what Kristaps Porziņģis can bring to this team. The one thing that worries me is that injury history throughout his entire career, but also you lose Marcus Smart, the former defensive player of the year, and really the only guy that held your superstars accountable. You know, he held Jason Tatum accountable, held Jaylen Brown accountable, and then you lose Grant Williams, which I know a lot of people are torn over about whether or not he was, a good part of this team, but he was good. He was versatile on the defensive end, on the offensive end as well. Honestly, I just don't feel comfortable saying that this team got better when you lose Marcus Smart and Grant Williams and only get Kristaps Porziņģis.
To Amina's point, health is a big concern with Porziņģis. Played 65 games last year, has not played more than 60 games since his second season. So now your entire front court rotation is two guys that have a long injury history, and Al Horford is 37 years old. So you need some depth on that front line, that's for sure.
And too, Chris, I know you've said on this show before that you also, can't look at this roster right now and say this is a better team now than it was when the season ended. I also wonder, we asked this question all year long last year. What's the identity? What's the identity?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the identity? It seems like the identity of this team is going to be shoot a bunch of threes.
I mean, but that's what they did last year. So I don't think it's all that different. What I would say, because as the emotional sting of losing Marcus Smart wears off, I will admit, like, if Porziņģis plays to the level he did last year, and there's a lot of buts in this conversation, and if he does, I feel like they do have more top-end talent, which ultimately is what drives success in the NBA. And so if Jason, Jaylen, and Porziņģis give you a real big three, I do think they are better equipped to handle the playoffs. But they need to figure out that grit. They got to figure out what Smart brings. And the one thing I push back on with Grant, if the coach isn't going to play him, is it really that big of a loss?
Fair on that one.
Right,
but the backcourt too. We talk about health. Malcolm Brogdon has an arm injury. No idea how significant that arm injury is, and he's got a long history of himself of being hurt during seasons. If Malcolm Brogdon is injured in any way, you're talking about really relying on guys like Peyton Pritchard, who barely played last year, and Sam Hauser, who's out of the rotation in the second half of the year. So there are a lot of question marks associated with this team right now.
Yeah, well, I mentioned the three-point shooting. If you're questioning why Brad Stevens made any of the moves that he did this summer, your answer may be this guy, the oft-criticized and soon-to-be second-year head coach Joe Mazzulla. ESPN's Brian Windhorst saying this on the Hoop Collective podcast yesterday. Not only was Mazzulla never in trouble, Brad Stevens' biggest moves as the president of the team has been to lean into more of the way Joe Mazzulla wants to play, which is high-volume three-point shooting and offense over defense. They are absolutely headlong into the Mazzulla mindset. This is the way Stevens and Mazzulla want to play. I mean, I don't have a problem with it when you're shooting the three well.
Right.
What I don't like is a blind reliance on a three and numbers of we have to have 43-point attempts every single night. Because if early in a game your team, and this happened with the Celtics and it happened in the playoffs, can't find their outside shot, it seems like they cannot switch and then find something else. They don't have that second gear to go to.
It is surprising to me that that's something that they want to lean into when we know that they've kind of had trouble with it in the past. I mean, when they went to the NBA Finals, Ime Udoka had them leaning into the defensive end to find their defensive identity. When they lost their defensive identity this past season, they had trouble out there on the court. So I'm surprised that the three-point shot is something that they would want to lean into, especially knowing, like, guys, they're not the Warriors. There's no Klay Thompson. There's no Steph Curry on this team. And I know that some nights it's working for them and they could put up those three-point shots and they fall. But Forbserg, how many times have we been here in studio literally screaming at the television saying, please stop shooting the three and find a different way to score points in this game?
I will be interested if in year 2 of Joe Mazzulla, there's a little bit more nuance.
Diversity?
Yeah, like diverse. I don't know. And I think it just has to be. And I think they understand that. And when you look at this team, I know it's easy to say, like, all they do is shoot threes, but I know Tatum takes a lot, but that's not all his game. Jaylen Brown certainly attacks the basket a ton. Porziņģis, while we sort of view him as just this guy who shoots from beyond the arc, there's a lot more to his game now. And so I do think there's ways for them to evolve offensively, but certainly I'd like to see that. And, you know, that quote it's funny to me, like, never in jeopardy. Well, is anyone going to come out now that he's back and be like, well, you know, we were thinking about five.
Yeah,
you know, like, so I take everything with a grain of salt, and I look over and I see Charles Lee and Sam Cassell sitting there, and I'm thinking, like, they knew they need a little bit of a upgrade there in terms of his staff needs to be better, Joe needs to be better, and he's going to be under a magnifying glass.
Look, I've been saying for months I never thought Joe Mazzulla was in any jeopardy. He is the closest thing that Brad Stevens has to a protege. He groomed him as an assistant coach. He kept him on Ime Udoka's staff. He promoted him when there are other more experienced coaches that he could have promoted ahead of him. He did what needed to be done this offseason, adding some gravitas to that bench. Sam Cassell is the first veteran with some gravitas since Walter McCarty was here. Charles Lee is one of the best assistant coaches in all the NBA. They have a terrific staff now to complement Joe Mazzulla.
Well, maybe they'll have another player to complement Joe Mazzulla. Time now for a Chevrolet Sportsnet Central update. Joel Embiid sent the internet into a frenzy yesterday after saying his only goal is to win a championship, quote, whether that's in Philly or somewhere else. But now 76ers general manager and best friend of Chris Mannix, Daryl Morey, trying to throw cold water on that today, saying he talked with Embiid and he only wants to win a title in the city of brotherly love. Chris, you have said, and you've mentioned his name before. You said, save your draft picks. Don't go after Damian Lillard. Wait to see if a guy like Joel Embiid, Luka Doncic, or Giannis Antetokounmpo becomes available. Could this be the type of seismic move that you would like to see the Celtics? For
sure. And look, I don't know if the Celtics have enough to necessarily get in that conversation. It's going to cost a huge, if Joel Embiid ever gets dealt, it's going to be a huge ransom. But, like, this is what you want to stay in the mix for. Like, Danny Ainge used to say it all the time. You just want to be able to get in the conversation, and not every team can do that. And the Celtics are positioned, even though you sit there and go, hey, what are second-round picks? They have all their own first, they have all these seconds, and they do have salary matching ability, so they can get in that conversation. I do think we're a long ways away from it, but Joel Embiid can't walk it back. He said it. I know he said, "Oh, I'm a troll. This is what I do. It's funny. Like, look at me. I was just getting everybody worked up." No, it's definitely on his mind that if it's not going to work there, the easiest thing to do is to say, "I want to be somewhere else." And as much cold water as they want to pour on it, Mannix, it's a real thing eventually if this team doesn't win.
There certainly is some merit to keeping your powder dry in case a player of that caliber becomes available. To Chris's point, if and when that happens, whether it's Embiid or Giannis or whoever, the Celtics are going to be outgunned in some of these offers. The New York Knicks have been keeping their powder dry for the last couple of years. Danny Ainge out in Utah, whole bunch of young players and assets. New Orleans is sitting down there, maybe with a Zion Williamson or Brandon Ingram to make the centerpiece of a package. It's very difficult. And knowing Daryl Morey, it just feels like he'd rather send Joel Embiid to Mars than to Boston or New York. Like, why would he want to have to look at this guy in his division every day for the next few years? I just find that very difficult.
Because Morey would trade him and then go find a new team, wherever James Harden's playing next.
Yeah, honestly, I think that is a player that the Celtics should be in on if that was the situation hypothetically down the line. I mean, Joel Embiid averaged 33 points a game just this past season, obviously reigning MVP, big body in the lineup. I mean, there's no downside, Trenni, when you talk about adding Joel Embiid to the Celtics. However, just like you said, Daryl Morey, he would rather want to send him to Mars, and I can obviously see why.
I think my only downside would be he's another guy. We question this about Jason Tatum, so it's only fair to question about it to Joel Embiid. When the pressure's on and the bright lights are there, he hasn't always been able to deliver for his team. And it's like, can he get over that hump? You said, Chris, just a few seconds ago, it could take a while, all of these things. So would you rather have the seismic move for the Celtics be Lillard or Embiid etc.?
I think, look, your window's right now. And if you can get Damian Lillard at a price that doesn't cost you any of your top-level players, I would go out and get him because I think Damian Lillard has at least 2 more years at playing at a high level. I know he doesn't have a lot of playoff games under his belt because Portland's been awful for most of the last few years, but Damian Lillard is a playoff performer. When Jason Tatum has those struggles in the playoffs, Damian Lillard could be there. When Jaylen Brown has his struggles, Damian Lillard could be there. I wouldn't count on Joel or Giannis being available and the Celtics being able to get him. If you could get Damian Lillard, I would go get him.
I'll just wait till Luka becomes available. Once Kyrie
I mean, that might be sooner than
nuts.
later. You might get tired of Kyrie Irving real quick. All right, well, the Celtics might not even need to trade for Embiid or Lillard if Jordan Walsh is as good as his hype.
Here we go.
Making him out to be the second-round pick. There's some sarcasm in my voice, at least. Second-round pick getting rave reviews for his summer league performance. The Ringer's Kevin O'Connor saying he looks like one of the steals of the draft. Walsh also getting major praise from our pal Kendrick Perkins and SB Nation. So you're not driving the hype train, Chris?
I'm old enough to remember when Marco Bellinelli was averaging like 35 points in Summer League. Nate Robinson had his jersey retired at Summer League. Jordan Walsh looks good. My guess is going to spend more time playing for the Maine Celtics next season does the Boston Celtics. Maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, some time to develop. But for next season, not counting on Jordan Walsh to contribute.
Yeah, I hate to be aligned. I think there's an opportunity. Like, he's got all the tools to be a rotation caliber player, but he's 19. He barely played at Arkansas. It's great that he shot 40% at Summer League, but let's see him do it. Let's see him do that for an entire preseason. Let's see him defend Jason and Jaylen every day in training camp, and then we can start the hype trains. And I love hype trains.
Yeah. Could he still be a steal, though? Like, even if it takes him some time
because it's 38th pick. You know, what were your expectations?
Exactly. I think he could still be a steal. However, him being in the rotation and contributing to the Celtics next season, I don't see that as something that's happening. I am not a part of this hype train at all. It is Summer League. Most of the guys that are in Summer League, they're probably not even going to be playing in the NBA at all. The pace of the NBA game, like just playing with professionals in Summer League, is 2 completely different worlds. So I'm just not on the hype train at all. But he does look good. I will say that. He's taking a step forward offensively.
This is the 8th inning home run guy in spring training and the 4th quarter running back.
He could be a steal. The Celtics have a pretty good history of drafting, over the last decade, Danny, to Brad, to the guys they have in the front office. But go on Basketball Reference and look at the second-round picks each year for the last 10 years. There's like 1 per year that actually turns into a rotation player, much less a star player. It's just a crapshoot when it comes to second round.
Draymond, Jokic.
Okay, that's 1, 2, that's per year. We'll go per year. All right, so you're saying Jordan Walsh is that guy. Chris Forbserg says Jordan Walsh is Draymond and Jokic.